So, welcome again to Cafe Scientifique. And our speaker this evening is Christopher Calvillo Munoz, who's a research associate at the Centre for Energy Policy at the University of Strathclyde. And he's got a strong interest in the energy transition and expertise on energy system models. So he's going to talk about electric vehicles. Are they the silver bullet to decarbonise transport? So thanks very much, Christian, for coming, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope this is of interest, and do ask questions. I have a relatively short presentation. Can everyone see it okay? Yeah.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Good. I am going to. Well, as I said, thank you very much. My name is Christian Calvillo. I am in Strathclyde, working in the Centre for Energy Policy. So this is my presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about electric vehicles, but before that, just try to say why it's important to decarbonize transport. After that, what can we electrify? Why we are thinking of electrification of transport? What is the role of EVs in all of this? And then what are the benefits and challenges of EVs? And I will try to end the presentation with, are they the solution? Are there anything else that we need to think of and some conclusions? So electrifying transport, why is it important? I think it's clear, we all know we need to tackle climate change. There are other sustainability issues there relating. We think of policies, different cities, different countries around the world have set net zero targets. That means that the total of emissions minus all the captured CO2 should be zero. So in theory, it shouldn't be polluting anymore. However, the timing is important. You need to do it quickly in order to delay or not increase the temperature as much than otherwise. To reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius that are committed by the Paris Agreement, we need to decarbonize the system by 2050, but you need to reach like a major reduction by 2030. That we're talking about 75% pre-industrial levels by 2030 and 100% by 2050. What happens if we don't do that? And this is an interesting map. This is from an area that you may be familiar with. This is the areas in red is what will be or potentially be submerged if we have a sea level rise of 1 meter, which is not that much. If you consider like the different scenarios, you can hear up to 3-5 meters. So this is what happens if 1 meter of the sea level rises, and all that will be potentially submerged. So it's a fairly large area, it's a fairly populated area, and I don't think we want that. Here on the right, you have a little bit more of a context around other parts of England. So yeah, it's not an option. We need to do this. Now, why transport? Why we focus on transport and not on anything else? But to be fair, we need to focus on everything. We need to do everything. We need to decarbonize all the sectors of the economy, all the system. But transport is the biggest one. If we see this one here, this is the emissions per sector. Sorry, this is the energy consumption per sector, which is very correlated to emissions. So if we see here, transport uses most of the energy in the UK. And from that chunk of transport, you get the road transport, which is 29%. So it's more than a quarter of all the emission, of all the energy consumption in the UK. Related to emissions, this is the emissions by for different transport systems. You get the biggest one, more than half of all emissions comes from passenger cars and taxis. So our cars pollute more than half of all the other means of transport, including AGVs, vans, shipping, domestic aviation, buses, metro, etc., etc. So here's like the main cause of all the problems regarding to transport. How do they compare to other sources of emissions? Here we have energy supply, power stations. They are for a little bit more emitters than passenger cars. But I think good efforts have been developing on decarbonizing the energy system, the power system, sorry. So that's thankfully going down. Passenger cars still up there. Then you have the business, residential. So they're all big polluters, and they all need to reduce. But as you can see here, passenger cars are important. So that's why there are a clear target for decarbonization. And the electrification of passenger cars using electric vehicles can really help to do this. So what can we electrify? And this is an interesting question, because you need to think that transport systems move, so they cannot be plugged all the time. So thinking of that, then you can actually need to really think on what can actually be electrified. This is an interesting graph. Might not say very much to most people, but I hope I can explain it a little bit more. So you're taking as a reference gasoline, and or petrol, and you can say how other fuels compare in energy density, and how like a different fuels have more energy but occupy more space, or they are heavier. For instance, diesel goes a bit to the right. They have the same energy content in weight, because they're the same level on the horizontal, sorry, but it goes a bit to the right, so it requires less storage space. So in less space, you can have more energy of diesel than in petrol, and they weight the same. You compare liquefied natural gas, it's slightly to the left, so it has less energy per volume, but it weighs a little bit more. So that's how you compare different things. Hydrogen is on this side. If you see, they have more energy per mass, like per weight, but they occupy less volume. So it's lighter. Not yeah. What I wanted to show you here is the red square, which are heavier than petrol and require more space. So that's kind of what you don't want. You would like to be on this side that is lighter and is smaller, but no, this is heavier and occupies more space. And here is the battery types that we use in electric vehicles. So you can see there is a very big difference between petrol and diesel and batteries, which is a problem. So how can electricity compete with other more energy dense fuels? And there is a point here. So electricity versus other energy carriers, the trump card of electricity versus the other fuels is efficiency. You may be aware of this already. Battery electric vehicles are about 70% efficient. That means for each unit of energy that you put into your car, 70% actually translate to moving the car, that energy that goes to the wheel and moves you around. Fuel cells, electric vehicles, this is with hydrogen, 60%, petrol and diesel, 25%. The green gas, if you use just natural gas, that will be 20%. Which means that most of the energy that you use by combustion of petrol and diesel is lost as heat, is not used to move the car. However, here you have 70%. So even though it's a lot less dense, so you need more battery weight or more amounts of batteries to be able to store the electricity, because it's more efficient. It is actually a good alternative, and that is why it makes it feasible to have electricity. And then we can say, well, what about costs? What about money? Was it better the electric vehicles or your good old petrol car? Interestingly, I guess it's not news that electric vehicles are more expensive than petrol cars at the moment. However, if you think the cost of ownership, taxes, insurance, and more than anything, the actual fuel cost, like the cost of you electrifying your transport rather than getting petrol at the station, you can see that over 5 years, electric vehicles are cheaper than a petrol car. Not by a lot, but they are cheaper. Like if you consider the use of your car for about 5 years, right now, they are cheaper. And the other thing is that electric cars, even though they're more expensive to buy right now, they're gonna become cheaper and cheaper. So eventually they will be at the same cost as a petrol or diesel car at the moment. So that's important to consider as well. And you can see here that the uptake of electric cars is rising rapidly. You can see 2010, we had barely any, and it starts growing very rapidly, almost exponentially. By 2019, we had about 7 million and a bit, and which is a very big increment. Interestingly here as well, most of the market goes to China. This is the Chinese electric vehicle, and this is the normal electric, a purely battery electric, and this is the hybrid. And then you get Europe, these two, the United States, and others. So what can we electrify considering all this? This is the easier options, of course: cars, taxis, vans, and trains. Trains are heavy and require lots of energy, but they can be plugged as they move. And we know they can be powered by electricity as they move along. So that's why it makes it possible. Vans, taxis, they have relatively urban conditions, so they can manage electricity in a fairly good way. When you brake, you restore a little bit of your energy, so that makes it more efficient to be used in cities and the cars, because of what we discussed before. But it's harder to electrify. Bigger vessels, things that cannot be plugged, aviation, HGVs, shipping, ferries, those are harder to electrify because they require a lot more energy to move. You cannot plug them. And the ones that are kind of in between are buses. There are many cities around the world where you can see electric buses nowadays, and they have systems like this. They get to a certain station, a certain stop, and they leave this connection, so they can connect to that roof of this charging point. So they can charge every now and then in particular bus stops and get a little top up and then continue their journey. So moving on, what are the benefits and challenges of EVs? I have mentioned a few of them, but I would like to go into a little bit more detail, in particular in the challenges. So what are the benefits of EVs? The direct benefits are that they are cheaper to run overall. As we discussed, a unit of petrol is considerably more expensive than a unit of electricity. So like to do 10 miles in an electric car will be a fraction of the price of doing 10 miles with a petrol car. With electricity, yes. They don't have emissions, and which is kind of the whole point here. We don't want emissions, again, to tackle climate change. Also, as you improve air quality, it has very important health benefits. I'm not sure if you have seen, but there are about 50,000 deaths related to air pollution in the UK every year. In other countries around the world, it's a lot worse, of course, depending on how bad their car stock is. But even in a relatively clean country, you have a higher number of deaths. So that will make a big difference. Also, the pollution and the noise, noise pollution is quite important. You may have seen that electric cars are very quiet. So all that makes it like excellent options, and you have the approval from Greta. But what are the challenges? This, and here I put real or perceived, because some may have been challenges, but maybe they're not challenges anymore. But there is still a perception there that they can be challenges there. The main one is the upfront cost, of course. They're more expensive to buy. Many people don't have the ability to pay the upfront cost of the cars. The lack of a second-hand market, again, because it's fairly recent that we started to see and buy electric vehicles. Those new cars are not old enough to be in the second-hand market yet, and there are lots of people that only buy second-hand it could be because of the same economy, or just because they just prefer to don't buy new, which is fairly enough. But these people don't have that option at the moment. Well, there are a few places where you can get second-hand electric cars, but it's very rare. So as we develop, there will be more of this. Range anxiety, that's a very well known. It's probably the most interesting one and the most common one. People feel anxious of not being able to reach their destination and be just left in the middle of the road. Charging points and charging times, of course, relates to range anxiety. If you cannot find a charging point, you cannot really do anything about. A charging time, it might take too long, then you're kind of stuck there till it charges, etc. The next few, they're probably less evident, but they're just as important. Lack of street parking, so you cannot charge at home. That's important as well, because this is normally easier if you can charge at home, but if you cannot, it makes it a lot more complicated. It makes it more expensive, and many people are against electric vehicles because of that. It's a bit of my case, unfortunately. At the moment, I don't have any. I live in a flat. I don't have any way of charging my car if I had it. So, thinking more of technical issues, as you get more electric vehicles, you increase your demand for electricity. You increase the pressure on the network. The networks will become more saturated, and that could create problems as well. And the last but not least, also quite a famous one, you're losing the fuel duty tax. If you don't consume petrol, the government loses that tax. So it's interesting to analyze that point as well. Some of these challenges, I will present them now. The range anxiety and the cost of the upfront cost, thankfully, is improving. What do I mean by this? If you compare the Nissan Leaf, which is one of the most popular electric cars from 2016, they cost £26,000 and they had a 155-mile range. The one in 2020 is £22,000, which is cheaper, considerably cheaper, even if you could, even more if you consider the cost of money, like the inflation, etc. And then you get a considerably longer miles range, 235 miles range. So it's definitely improving, and this trend, it will continue to improve. It's a big difference from what we had, and you can see it. Talking about range anxiety and charging point anxieties, well, this is an interesting thing. I'm going to tell you a little story. You might see me here in the back. In Strathclyde, we had a couple of electric vehicles that can be used by staff for university business, and they work as a car sharing system. There is an app where you book your car whenever you need it, and then it's there. You use the car to open it up, and you pick it up, you use it for what you need, and then you bring it back, put it to charge again. And it's fine, it works great, and it's free, and it's quite popular among the staff. We had an event in Edinburgh. We live in Glasgow, we are in Glasgow, which is about 45 miles from Glasgow, 45, 50 miles. So I told my colleagues, hey, why don't we go in one of the electric vehicles? 50 miles is within the range, should be fine. We just go there. Where we were going, that place, they had a charging point there, so we just leave it charging, so then we can come back, no problem. Well, the problem was, we got the car, but of course, it's a car sharing system, so I had no control of how the car will be when I pick it up. And it wasn't fully charged. It had like 60, 70% battery. So I was like, I'm not sure. In theory, it should be doable, but I was a bit concerned at that point that we might not be able to manage all the way to Edinburgh. So we went, thankfully, barely, we made it to Edinburgh, which, was a bit stressing. a bit stressful, sorry. But we got there, thankfully, we managed to put it to charge. The charging point where we were, it wasn't a fast charge, it was kind of a medium, slow charger. So by the time we finished and we get kicked out of the other building, like because they were closing, the car wasn't fully charged. It was like about 50%. So we knew that we weren't going to make it back home. But on the way, we just drove back on the motorway. We saw the good thing is all these cars have a very interesting app where it tells you the next charging point where it is, and a car recommends you should park here to charge because you're not going to make it otherwise. So we park. We stopped in Motherwell, which is kind of in the middle of the way, and we got there a fast charger, one of these super fast chargers, and we charged the whole battery in 20 minutes, which was great. So then we can continue our journey safely. So it was a bit of a pain. It was a bit stressful. It wasn't great as a first experience. It was my first experience with an electric vehicle. So you can say, well, are you having second thoughts? I think we were just unlucky because, as I said, this was a car sharing scheme. I had no control on the car, and I had no control how charged it would have been. I was a bit inexperienced. Well, I was inexperienced. I didn't know what to expect on range because it can tell you, the car, one thing, but that's normally for city driving. And when you're in the motorway, it's different. You use more energy in the motorway. We were unlucky with the charging points because if we had a faster charger along the way, it would have been better, easier, and it wouldn't be no problem. But we were a bit unlucky on that. But if it was my car, I think I will just prepare differently. I will know how long, how much battery I needed, so I were charging it beforehand. I will know my range, so I could manage that as well. So I think if it was my car, I would have prepared it differently. I would know what to do, what to expect, and I would have done it no problem. And as I said, the range keeps going up, and right now you get very wide range of electric cars that do more than 200 miles. Like Teslas do almost 300 in some cases. So it is a long range. And how often do you do more than that? I don't know everyone's driving like profiles, but I never drive really. And when I do, I don't really go more than like 50 miles to Edinburgh or somewhere around here in Glasgow. And yeah, charging at home is still the best option for most, but we need more charging points for people in flats like myself. The good thing about that is the charging points are improving as well. This is a little diagram, and you can see the progression on charging points from, let's say, 6,500, 7,000 in 2016 to almost 25,000 by 2021. So it's definitely improving, and it's getting better there. A couple of very recent news stories. This actually, the one on the left, came out today. Ofgem, the energy regulator, it's boosting with 300 million the charging network infrastructure, allowing for 3,550 new ultra-rapid charging points. Like the one I mentioned that charged the whole thing in 20 minutes, they're investing now 3,000 and a half new charging points. So that will make a big difference, especially for those longer trips. 20 minutes is what you will take in parking, getting a coffee, going to the toilet, and continue your journey. It's absolutely game changer, I think, for many. 3,500 might not be enough, actually. You probably need more, but it's a very good start. And the other option for those like myself that we live in flats and we don't have off-street parking, there are new initiatives like this one. People having their drive, they have charging point there. Of course, you charge at home overnight, but maybe during the day you go to work. You can let people charge at your home, and you get paid for that, which I think is a great idea, and that will allow people like me to get access to an electric vehicle. So there are options, and they will continue to get options. But there are still challenges, as we said. The charging points, unfortunately, at the moment, there are many different networks for charging, and sometimes they're incompatible. For example, Teslas, they have their own stuff, and they're not compatible with anyone else. And charging at these charging points are normally more expensive than charging at home. So that's a challenge. You also have the geographical distribution. Unfortunately, it's very London-centric at the moment. Most of the charging points are in Greater London. Why? I don't know. Because of, well, I do know. It's because of the uptake. You have more electric vehicles in London, there will be more charging points in London, because the companies that do this, they want them to be used. So you put them where there are more cars. So that's a bit of a challenge at the moment, but it will get better. And here, the Ofgem announcement of today is very welcome. We still need more charging points, not only fast chargers on motorways, we need all sorts everywhere. Those without off-street parking, as myself, as I said, but the options here, and I think are very promising. It's thinking of park and ride schemes, destination charging. That means charge when you go to shops, when you're going shopping, or you're going to the city center, you have in your big multi-story parking lots charging points. So you do your day normally. You're gonna go there anyway. You're gonna park there anyway. You might as well charge it, and it could be an interesting incentive for you to go to buy to Tesco's instead of Sainsbury's if they have a charging point, for instance. So destination charging will be an option as well. If you're going to work, your employer might have a charging point there. So that's definitely an option there for destination charging. Charging point sharing, as I discussed just before. The lack of a significant second-hand market, again, a challenge for many, especially those that cannot afford a brand new car. But as I said, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. We need more charging points, and people don't buy cars because they don't see charging points. But the way that you get more charging points is by buying more cars. Because if there are more cars in the roads, the people that put the charging points will invest in them because it will be a good business. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, unfortunately. But we need to remember, and I forgot to mention that, but we have a target of selling no more petrol and diesel cars by 2030. So it's not an option. EVs will happen. The sooner they happen, the better. And here's my idea is that most of these issues will be addressed as we have more EVs. So those who can afford it now, I would recommend to get them now. So for those that come after, it will be easier. And who can afford it now and who can charge at home, I think it's a no-brainer because, as I said, it's cheaper than to have a petrol car now. And as a funny side note as well, I was in a conference just before COVID with a French professor. I was chatting about this, and people living in urban areas were very concerned. They were saying, "Oh no, but the people in rural areas will never get EVs because they drive a lot, the long distances." And it was kind of the opposite of what people thought. People in rural areas were the ones having the electric vehicles, but because for them it made a lot more sense. It was a lot cheaper to move around. The range was about the range that you needed to go anywhere. You don't really drive more than 200 miles in a one go. And many of these people in rural areas, they don't have a petrol station nearby. They might still drive 20 miles to get to the petrol station, so they might as well charge at home. So yeah, it's definitely not an issue. You don't live nearby a city. You can definitely have an EV. Moving on the other challenge, on the impacts on the power system. As I said, we have more cars that they need electricity. Before they didn't need electricity. So if you consider that all the cars will be using electricity, that will require a lot more energy generation. And then our cables or network might not be able to cope. And the important thing is the electrification of transport won't happen in isolation. We need to electrify heat. We cannot use gas anymore. That's reality, unfortunately. So most of us will have to electrify heat using heat pumps or using storage heaters or using some sort of other thing, but it has to happen. Many industrial processes will have to be electrified as well. Not everything can be electrified, but many will be electrified. We have the option of carbon capture and storage, capturing the CO2 produced and the storage somewhere. That will need energy to operate as well, so more electricity needed. If we consider using hydrogen for industrial processes, for instance, or maybe some small cases for heating, residential heating, we'll need electrolysis for that as well to do it in a clean way. So all that need electricity will need a lot of electricity. That's kind of my point. According to this little report from the BBC, if we are to electrify everything, as I said, they are thinking of that the electricity demand will almost triple, considering all these changes. So yeah, cars, household heating, and household lighting, the demand will be almost triple. So that's a lot more energy that we need. So how can we reduce the impacts on the network? You may be familiar with these two concepts. The first one is smart charging. You charge when it's better for the network, not when you want. So you charge you put your car to charge, but it won't start immediately. It will have some sort of control that will tell you, you know what, this is not the right time. Wait an hour, and then you can start charging. And pretty much it's avoid the peak time when everyone is using electricity, because that's when you can get problems in the network. The other option is vehicle to grid. It's a interesting concept. The idea is that you use your car as a battery, because the car has batteries. So you use it as a battery charge whenever you have extra energy that cannot be used. So you charge it. And then if the system needs that energy because of, I don't know, a transformer failed somewhere, or a power system, a power generator went down, and you require that energy immediately, then the car that has the spare capacity can send it back to the network and can provide this service to the grid. You will get paid for that, and then everyone is happy. This is a little diagram from the national grid future energy scenarios. And what I wanted to show you is what happens if you just charge your car. This is the amount of energy that you need, the top dotted line. If you charge using the smart charging system method, the peak is not as high. If you see, you can reduce quite a bit. It goes to this like a slash line. But if you do the vehicle to grid according to them, you can even reduce it further, and then the line goes all the way down here. This is the peak time. It doesn't mean that you have negative consumption, but during the peak time, it will be like this. It will be shifted to other areas, to other times of the day. But even if you do if you do like a smart charging, vehicle to grid charging, you still need a lot more generation. This is the electricity peak demand according to the different scenarios. We are in the black line here, 2020, we're around 60 gigawatts of demand we have now. In most scenarios, they are considering that it will be around 80, so it's 20 gigawatts more by 2050. But in this one, which is electrifying everything, you're around 90 gigawatts. So it's not quite double, but it's maybe 70% more than one we have now. So it's a lot more energy that we need. And of course, if you need more energy, you will need to reinforce the network. You will need to have very large investments. Unfortunately, that sounds bad, because that will be paid by us via your taxes or via your energy bills. But it's not all that bad, and that is part of the research that we've been doing in Strathclyde. We have been analyzing the impacts on the network and the impacts on the economy based on those investments that we need to put in place. And the interesting thing here is that because of the power sector is very domestic, that means the generation is produced, like the electricity is produced in the UK. Most of the system and most of the skills and the labor is based in the UK. It's actually very strong domestic supply chain. So for every pound you invest, you get a good return. So we analyze this, and we find that investing for this electric vehicles rollout, you can get up to 30,000 new jobs and an overall improvement of the economy. What about the fuel duty tax, which a lot of people say, how can the government increase that revenue? If you think of how how the government gets money, they can do it in two ways. One is increasing taxes, of course. The other one is increasing the size of the economy. You don't increase your tax, you have the same level of tax. However, if you have a better thriving economy, people will consume more. Every time you buy more stuff, you pay VAT, so that gets more revenue to the government. If you are doing better, you get a better salary, you get more, you get taxed more, etc. So if the economy grows, the government will get more money. So that's what you want. You don't want to increase taxes, because that's kind of bad for the economy. You want to increase the size of the economy. And that's the other thing we found in our research, that you get a positive net expansionary activity across the economy that will allow the government to get more gains. So it's positive because of the way it is constituted in the economy, which is not the same as in petrol. Petrol and diesel is very much an imported industry. We do refine some petrol and some diesel here in the UK, but the oil comes from abroad. We do get some extraction in the North Sea, but it's not to the levels of consumption we have. So import lots of petrol. Most of these companies are multinational anyway, so they're based somewhere else. So most of the money that you spend on petrol and diesel goes somewhere else and get benefit somewhere else, not in the UK. And that's the important thing here. And that's why, even if you don't produce the cars here, just by using them will be positive to the economy. So it sounds good. EVs are here to stay. There is no question about it. We might not like them, but they are here. And as we said, the policies are there. I won't be able to buy any more EVs in the future. Sorry, not EVs now, petrol and diesel in the future. So we need to get to the idea that EVs are here. They're also good to the economy, as we discussed. But are they the solution? And I wanted to discuss here a little bit more on sustainable mobility as a whole. This is a very simplistic, let's say, example of the energy pyramid. And when we're talking about sustainability, when we're thinking about sustainable use of energy, we normally think of this one, using renewables. However, what we should be thinking is on the base of the pyramid, which is energy conservation. And then when you get that done, you can move to the next step, which is energy efficiency. And then you go to the renewable energies. Now we have examples here of what we mean. Conservation is pretty much reducing waste, leaks on your water, your energy, your insulation in your home to don't waste heat. Energy efficiency is to have appliances that are more efficient. They use less energy to do the same thing, like the light bulbs, etc. And then renewables is, of course, getting renewable energy. Electric vehicles work in these two categories more efficient and more renewable, but not so much on this one. And that's why that's where the problem lies. So what we're trying to do to make sustainable mobility is to reducing the energy waste in mobility. So how can we reduce energy use in transport? There are a couple of options, of course. First one is reduce unnecessary travel. If you don't have to go somewhere, just don't go. Smart urban planning. That means to have everything you need nearby, like your workplace should be close to you, your leisure activities should be close to you, your shopping should be close to you, your school, etc. So if everything is nearby to you, you don't really need to travel that far. You can walk it there. Remote working, another option that we learned in COVID times, that it is possible to work remotely for many, including myself. I haven't been in my office since March last year. So that's the option. And yes, working remotely. What we think we're doing, unfortunately, the problem with that is you work too much, but it is definitely what we do. However, if you must travel, there is more things we can do. So if you must travel, don't get an SUV. We know the SUVs are the bigger sport utility vehicles. And why we shouldn't use SUVs? Firsthand, because they are more dangerous. You can see here the example. This is a very small car, but this is a SUV. It's humongous in comparison. They're less safe. Why? Because they're bigger. Because they're bigger, they require more energy to move. And a heavier vehicle, if you get into an accident with a heavier car that has more energy, it will be transferred more to your passenger and or whatever you hit. And you can think of the same way of being hit by a bus is not the same as being hit by a smart car, the smarts. You probably won't die by the smart, it depends on the speed, of course, but if you get hit by a 10-mile by a smart car, it will hurt, might break you something, but you probably won't die. If you get hit by a bus at 10 miles per hour, you probably will die anyway. So yeah, and it's not only me saying this. This is by the Committee on Climate Change. Again, because they're bigger, they're less efficient to move. They require more energy, and they are less aerodynamic, so that also requires more energy. So all the improvements on technology that we have better cars now, they kind of disappear because of the heavier cars. So bad idea. Don't get an SUV unless you absolutely need it. But most people, we don't. We travel by themselves. We drive alone in a car that is 3 tons. So it's really no point to do that. And that's kind of a point of discussion here. Why do we get SUVs in the first place? It's a recent thing. It hasn't been there forever. It's more like the last 10, 20 years that people start buying them more. And then the question is like, it's more of a behavioral issue. It's technology. It's the industry that's telling you that. It's a policy thing that we need to do more. So yeah, just leave it there. So yes, we understand. Try to not travel. If we need to travel, try to get a smaller car, what else can we do? Well, electric vehicles, of course. They are more efficient than petrol and diesel, about 3 to 4 times. They don't have the emissions, they don't pollute directly. So are they the solution? They are a bit of a solution. They solve the CO2 emissions problem, at least at the point of use, but they don't solve the land use problem. And also they don't necessarily improve access to sustainable and fair mobility. But what do I mean by this? And let me show you an example. So one more lane. You might have seen this or a version of this. It is a famous image of Thanksgiving traffic jam in Los Angeles. This is the Thanksgiving is kind of Christmas in the US, as you may know. It's a big thing. Everyone travel. Everyone goes to see their families. Everyone is everywhere. It's a big thing. So everyone travel, and they got this epic traffic jam. It was miles and miles long. There is a video there. You probably can look for. It's amazing. There's hundreds of thousands of cars pretty much stuck in a parking lot. And if you can see here that highway, that motorway, is like 10 lanes wide each side. I've never seen such a big thing in the UK. There maybe exist, I don't know, but I've never seen that big. And it still is a parking lot. So it means that more lanes, and it's being researched, it's been proven, it's absolutely certainty. If they don't improve traffic, they make it worse. They absolutely make it worse. And I put here a small video recommendation. If you can look for this in YouTube, how highways make traffic worse. It's a case of the US, but it's playing the same principle. And it applies for everything, really. But you get more lanes, you encourage more people to drive. People that otherwise won't drive will drive, and then you get traffic jams again. And it's a never-ending cycle. So electric cars will get you this again. It's not a solution. And as I said, sustainability is more than energy use. This is the other example of the land use problem. On the left-hand side, you get lots of cars. On the right-hand side, you get a bus. Same amount of people can travel in the bus or in all those cars. What is a better use of your land? I would say the right-hand side. This, you require 2 lanes to operate, more or less, and in this case, you need 6. So that's the difference, and that's why electric vehicles, they do help. They solve one problem, but they won't solve this problem, and this is a big problem, because at the end of the day, we need that land to plant more trees, to create more businesses, more spaces for us, for our families, more green spaces, as I said here. And also to improve accessibility to people. It's more expensive to buy a car than to use the transport system. So you remove some of this space and you use it for this, you get a more reliable public transport, and will increase accessibility, social justice, again, people that cannot get access to the cars, and general well-being. But then people say, but COVID, we are not supposed to go into buses or trains, and it's true. And that's where we can think of something else. So what is the best form of mobility? As I said, public transport is definitely up there. I think it's absolutely necessary, and we should have better public transport. And the better it is, the more people will use it, and that's good. But in my humble opinion, the best public transport system is active travel. And that means walking, cycling, skating, roller skating, however you want to do it, but in a way that is active and that is more personal. And the question here is, how long is your commute? The average car trip in the UK is less than 9 miles. Most people will travel less than that as a normal commuting day. My commute is 2 miles. I walk it, or I can take the train, or I can cycle, but I don't really die because there's no point. 2 miles is kind of, yeah, I probably can drive faster than the time I take to get into the car and find a parking spot. So 9 miles is absolutely something that you can do cycling. And for those that can say, well, actually cycling, it's good, but I don't want to get all sweaty to go to work, you have electric bikes. They help you a lot. And or if you have big hills, they make a massive difference. I don't know if anyone has tried them, They are absolutely amazing. I really recommend to use electric bikes just to give it a try, and they do make the difference. And it is possible. You can cycle them all year long. And we have the Netherlands as an example. You have the Germans as an example. The Dutch, the German, or the Danish. They cycle all year long, and I think the Danish weather is probably worse than what we have here. So it's definitely doable. And of course, this double approved by Greta because it's cleaner, it's healthier, it's more efficient in all way, and it's cheaper. So why, if it's cheaper, cleaner, and healthier, why don't we cycle more? That's a very good question, and I will leave it that to the audience to answer. I have some ideas on that as well, but I would like to hear people's opinions. So just some conclusions to finish. Electrification of transport is a necessity. It has to happen. There is no question about it. And I think that's important. I don't want to put that into discussion because it's not a discussion. It has to happen. It's more like how and when, but it has to happen, unfortunately. And what is the best thing to electrify? Cars and vans. Absolutely. It makes absolute sense on economic points of view. It has our challenges, but it has to happen. So that's what will happen. Aviation might be more difficult. Shipping will be more difficult. So cars and vans has to be electrified. EVs can produce important economic benefits. As I said, they are good for the economy in the long run. And they also help you if you will be paying less on your petrol costs. So it's good in both sense. However, EVs are not a silver bullet for all the reasons I mentioned. And a one-to-one replacement of cars with EVs is not compatible with net zero. All the future scenarios on the analysis from the climate change committee, the national grid base, all the policy people say is great, but we cannot replace one-to-one because that won't get us to where we want to be. We also need to reduce the travel miles. We also need to reduce the number of cars because at the end of the day, to produce the cars, that creates pollution as well. We need to consider that. And again, they will drive electricity cost up and not accessible for everyone. Well, the land use problem, as I discussed. So I guess that's what I want to get across here. We are facing a time where we are going to change everything. The way we heat our homes, the way we work, the way we move, the way we do things. So why don't we use this chance to change the way we do things, to rethink mobility and make it more efficient, more accessible, more inviting to people to reduce waste and improve well-being. And again, we have lots of examples around the world. We just need to think a little bit across the pond. So yeah, that's me. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you. That's excellent. So looking for any questions now or comments. I think Colin Megson has a couple in the chat there. Did you want to put your question, Colin, if you unmute yourself? Are you still there, Colin? Well, I'll read it. The first one was the deflagration of 4 passenger buses in China just a few days ago was horrifying. If loaded, the speed which it happened meant no one would have escaped. Will this be an issue that may not go away?
I am not aware of this. I'm not sure what happened or how it happened or what was the reason. So I cannot really comment because I don't know what it is. Lithium, if it's about the batteries themselves, I think it have been proven that they're pretty safe. It's not that it's impossible that they can combust and create a problem. It is possible, but I guess the risk is the same or less than what will happen with a petrol car. A petrol car can get into flames if you crash very badly. You can have a fire and be very dangerous, but it's just the same with the lithium batteries. I would say because there is not sparks, there is nothing like combusting at any point really, it should be less of an issue. But again, if the person can comment on the specific case, I probably can say a little bit more, but I'm not aware, sorry.
No, I don't know about that either. So unless anybody else who's here knows what the reference is, Colin's not answering. So another question he had were SUVs are being offered in BEV form. Wishful thinking will not change the attitudes of the majority of people. It will surely take legislation or taxes to change attitudes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
SUVs exist because people buy them. I think that's the short mention there. They do have a purpose for some people. Like if you live in a very off-road area and you really need that capacity to do off-road 4x4 big things, it's fine. But most people that have an SUV, they just do urban driving and they probably drive by themselves. So they don't even need the size of the car. So you have the batteries for SUVs, but because they buy them, people buy them, and as long as people keep buying them, they will exist. So yes, legislation is a good way of changing that. Having some sort of maybe extra tax because of the size of the car, it's an option, but it's up to politicians to decide on that one, unfortunately.
I see that Colin has unmuted himself. Colin, did you want to comment?
If I could just, I'm putting the link for the bus video in the chat, but I could say to Christian that the speed at which the deflagration happened was unbelievably fast. It was nothing like a gasoline explosion. It was almost instantaneous. People wouldn't have had above a few seconds to try to escape.
Do you know what caused this? Like, was it like a test as an experiment, or just an accident?
All the buses were parked. There were 5 of them in a row. The first one issued a little puff of smoke, and then within seconds, the bus across its entire length was on fire. And then it passed it on to the next bus, and I think 4 out of the 5 were completely burnt out. So the speed at which it happened was a real issue.
But again, do you know why it happened? Was it
no?
Was it on purpose?
They were all parked, presumably there to be left overnight. Yeah.
Well, on the batteries, the life that people expect them to be replaced is when they reach 70% capacity. So they degrade over time. The normal, I think someone asked about that as well in the chat I was looking at. The normally suits are supposed to be changed when they are about 8 years old. But that doesn't mean that it's like completely, absolutely obsolete pack. They are still 70% good, if that makes sense. But I think to avoid this type of problems, I guess they're replaced earlier. They're replaced around 8 years. But if you keep them, you probably can keep them for 20. But that's not what happens. They get replaced earlier.
But there is a development that batteries are now being made as structural members, which will be literally wrapped all around you in the vehicle. So wouldn't that be even more dangerous?
I'm not aware of that happening. As far as I understand, the batteries are always on the base, like on the floor of the car, of the chassis. I'm not aware of that. I'm sorry, but if you can pass information, we can have a look.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you did answer Claude's question: is lithium recyclable, or does it have an expiry date? Or no, that's about lithium rather than the battery, is it?
Is the element? All elements can be recycled. Lithium can be recycled. I think there's a good point there. I think older manufacturers of battery packs, they probably weren't thinking of recycling when they were producing them. So it's not as straightforward to recycle older systems. I think they're now being pushed more by governments to make them recyclable more easily and not to require like very in-house developments there. So it is definitely recyclable. It is getting better. but again, you need to push legislation on that because if you let the companies to do whatever they want, they will do whatever is cheaper, and normally cheaper is not recycling.
I'm asking this question because the Institute of Engineers have got quite a few reports according to which if you make all the calculations, the lithium works out just as energy intensive as any other fuel because of the way it's sourced, extracted and manufactured. And so I was just wondering whether at the other end of the same cycle, we would end up with a problem with disposal of lithium once it's not working for, or whether it can be used for other things if it's no longer can be used as an energy storage material.
I'm not a materials expert, so I'm not sure, but I do know that it can be repurposed to lower grade batteries, like the ones we use in our phones. There are just lithium as well. So I think that's probably what you use. We use lithium for a lot of things, so that's potentially an option.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And Katie has asked, what's the UK doing about sourcing lithium locally?
I'm not aware of any source of lithium in the UK. If Katie knows, you can share, that would be great, but I'm not sure about that, unfortunately. So I think it's all imported. Most of the battery packs come from China at the moment.
Yeah, and that is a problem, because there was a program on Radio 4 this morning saying 99% of the lithium comes from China. Do we want to start mining Greenland for it and things like that? Because we are in a very vulnerable position for all our rare earths and for lithium.
But do we have lithium in the UK? So there is...
I don't know. I think I heard a program sometime saying there's some down in the southwest, but I can't remember. But I mean, surely this is important. We shouldn't be, if we had all our lithium cut off and we were all, lots of us in electric cars, I mean, it's a really important point.
Yeah, the problem with mining anything, it comes with the mining itself. And I know probably some of you know what it looks like to have a coal mine or something, an open mine somewhere in your country, which is very, well, ugly and polluting by itself. So I don't know if that's something you want in your own country. But it's true that it has to be produced somewhere. So you might get a benefit from producing it here, but you also have the drawback on that front.
But it's a political vulnerability.
Pardon?
I just said it's politically very vulnerable. We're very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think there's lithium available in South America and Australia. I don't know that there's any in this country, but
I think Cornwall. I think Cornwall is investigating, or somebody's investigating in Cornwall the likelihood of a lithium mine.
Okay, let's keep a track of that.
Yeah, I will just to say on that front, we need to remember that we need to remember the bigger picture. If by getting lithium in this country, we destroy very good peatland or forest, I think we'd rather keep the peatlands and forest. But yeah, it all depends on the actual project.
Yeah, okay, thanks. John Douglas has a question. Would you like to?
Yeah, thanks very much for your talk. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
I just happened to catch a program for consumers called Rip Off Britain on Friday. And they seem to suggest, well, very clearly with evidence, that the big companies like Citroën and Nissan are passing on the costs of replacement modules in the power mechanisms for cars to the consumer, to the effect of £5,000 in one case and £7,000 in another. Once it went on the TV, of course, they agreed to pay those individual consumers. But isn't this a problem if they don't have the staff to actually maintain the cars, whereas you can go to Quick Fit and get diesel and petrol cars fixed reasonably or pretty cheaply? What is the issue concerning these cars where they're just passing on replacement modules, have to go to a dedicated provider in which they're charging more than you can get for a second-hand. You buy a second-hand car for that.
It's a good point. Thank you. I think that's unfortunately, again, to the point of, because we don't have as many, you don't have as all the supply chains that goes around it. If you have more cars around, I think there will be more interest of people working in garages to retrain and get the skills to service electric vehicles. I'm sure it will be better and better as we move along. I'm not sure about this particular case, but I can believe it's true. If you have a very particular type of car and that cannot be maybe serviced here in the UK, which is quite unfortunate, and that's where legislation also works. So they can only sell cars that can be serviced in the UK as a reasonable price. Because I think this is the cost of you say, as specialized people have to do it somewhere else that is not here. So yeah, it's an unfortunate case, but I think it will be, I hope, one of very unfortunate case and not to be the commonplace.
Okay, thanks. Paul Marchant has a question too. Are you with us still, Paul?
Yeah, I'm a bit reluctant. My link will fall over, but can you hear me all right?
Yeah,
yep.
We can.
Only just to say that electric vehicles are heavier than their petrol hydrocarbon equivalents, and therefore probably more likely that they will produce more road wear and tyre wear, which is, I understand, produces particulate pollution, these PM 2.5s and stuff.
Yeah, no,
so
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good question. I have had that one before, actually. Similar size cars, they can be more like heavier. That is true, because of the battery packs are heavier. They lose weight on the engines because they don't have the engines, but they do have the battery pack, so they can be a bit heavier. The benefit on electric vehicles, on particulate matter in particular, is that they break less. On the wheels, I'm not sure how much more wear and tear they have. I cannot comment on that because I don't have any statistics. It could be there's a bit more. I'm not sure. But on the brake pads, which is normally what creates the PM 2.5, the electric cars have regenerative braking, so they brake with the same engine to recharge their batteries and don't use the actual brake pads as much. That's why I say that for taxis, for buses, they're great, because they you have to start and stop a lot. So you use that energy again to recharge your batteries a little bit, instead of braking with two pieces of metal that pretty much the only thing they do is heat up and lose all that energy as a way of heat. So instead of doing that, you do it in the batteries. And because of that, my understanding is that they produce less PM 2.5 particulate matter.
Thank you. Thanks. Actually, Helen has put a comment in. Looks like bus video may be a fake. The link, there is a link to the video there.
I haven't looked at it. I will look at it later if I may. I don't want to get distracted.
But that did make me think there is a lot of propaganda, of course, put out by rivals. You know, I'm thinking in particular of the petrol producing companies and oil producing companies. They probably don't want to go too quickly to electrification. So there'll be all kinds of false, I guess, statements and so on. You know, we've come across fake news a lot in recent years. Do you think that might be a problem?
Oh, that's absolutely a problem. I think, thankfully, it's getting better. I think most of the car manufacturers, for instance, they are moving chips. They understand that this is what it has to happen. And the governments have setting targets on banning new petrol and diesel cars. So if Ford, for instance, wants to keep selling cars, they will need to start selling electric cars. Otherwise, they won't sell any. So I think that the big companies are moving towards that, which is good. Even the big petrochemical companies, BP, Shell, any of those, they're also starting to invest heavily on renewables because they know that they need either want to exist in the future. So I think it was more the case a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. They're slowly getting to the electric vehicles van, but it's definitely a problem. And I still see that with the big people that are for hydrogen. They're still against electric vehicles a little bit, and so I'm not sure there will be more fake videos and fake things all around.
Okay, good. That's I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Peter Bonsall has said, put in our comment about lithium carbonate being produced for the first time in Cornwall.
Okay.
And I think Colin again, Maxon, present day nuclear power plants can manufacture green hydrogen through the HTSE process. At present day grey hydrogen cost, that will be as competitive as the pumps with diesel. Will FCEVs compete with BEVs for personal transport if this happens?
And then it's about the video. I'm not aware about this particular technology to create grey hydrogen. Well, green hydrogen in this case with the nuclear power plants. So I cannot comment particular case. If it's similar cost, I don't see why not. But I see it more happening in the hydrogen will be a role for hydrogen, and I see that happening more with HGVs, long distance lorries. And with trains, like we don't have all electric trains. All those that run with diesel, they will probably use hydrogen. So there will be a role for hydrogen, and they're definitely there. I see it a bit less so with EVs, and because at the moment, I don't know if anyone is aware, I think the only fuel cell electric vehicle that you can buy in the UK is the Honda Mirage, and I think it costs like £60,000 or something like that, or probably even more. And there are only like 14 petrol stations for hydrogen across the UK. So it's really not convenient at the moment. The electric batteries, electric vehicle with batteries, is a lot more widespread. You can get many manufacturers, you can get charging points. It's still not to the level that we need, but there are a lot more options, a lot cheaper. So it can happen. I don't see it happening soon enough, which is probably the problem. If this technology, whatever it is, exists now, and is widespread now, it can potentially replace batteries, but it might not. I think it won't happen in the time scale that we need, and that's why batteries probably will be the thing for now.
Yeah, thanks. Steve Cockrell has put in a comment about highest reserves of lithium being in Chile.
In Chile, yeah.
There's quite a long way to go before Cornwall can match that, I guess. And Rod McCullough, the last year has seen less buses, airplanes and cars, and I'm getting various figures for CO2 up or down. What figures do you believe?
You need to look at the sources. There is definitely less buses, less airplanes, but there have been more cars in general. If you see absolute numbers, it might be less, but people that were potentially using public transport before, they moved to cars. So it hasn't, I think it's overall has decreased, but it might not have decreased as much as we should have for the reasons that we just discussed. With transport, in CO2 transportation, it's very important to look what is included, because sometimes they don't consider aviation, or they consider only domestic aviation and not international. The same with shipping, they might consider only domestic shipping and not international shipping. So you need to be careful when what it's included in those figures. That might create that difference.
All right, thanks. And finally, Helen may be withdrawing her comment about the fake film. Anyway, I guess you can all look and see what you think yourself. Claude has a comment here. There's been little energy decrease during first lockdown, largely because a lot of buildings continued using energy even without people in them. Yeah.
Yes, and energy use in general has increased. Well, like building energy use has increased because we spend more times here. And some buildings, like commercial buildings, I understand why they keep a little bit of heating on, because you don't want to create damp issues and things like that, but it's a bit unfortunate that you get that. Yes, the demand curve has changed. It's more earlier in the day than later in the day as it was before. So it's not so much in the evenings, some more throughout the whole day. But yes, it is something else that we need to consider as we move forward. We need to reduce energy as a whole, not only in transportation.
Okay, and there's still news coming in about the Cornish lithium finds. So I guess we'll all go on looking for that, see what happens there.
Yeah.
I think there are no more questions here. So I just want to say thank you very much, Christian. That's been a really thought-provoking and really interesting talk. It's certainly true that we've got to do something, I think. So we just hope that there's time for us to actually change the way we behave before things get too bad.
It's never too late. That's why I encourage those who don't have an EV and can afford one, just get one. you still get some subsidies, so take advantage of those.
And you would say that's much better than a hybrid. I mean, I have a hybrid, thinking that was good.
Hybrids are absolutely fine. If you have one, but the moment just keep it and use it as long as it goes. The problem with hybrids is depending on the type of hybrid. Some hybrids are less electric than petrol, and some are more electric, more petrol than electric. So you need to check the actual cost of running it. That it may end up to be just as expensive as a petrol car. So, yeah. But I think it's better to just go all the way to the electric if you can afford it, of course, and if you have a place to charge it. It will be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And that's made us think about some of the disadvantages as well, which are obviously important, and we shouldn't neglect those. So thank you again, Colin. I think we should give you a virtual round of applause.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And just to remind our regulars that the next meeting is actually on Tuesday, not on Monday, Tuesday, the 15th of June. And that's on Towards a Smog-Free City with Gary Fuller from Imperial College in London. And then we have one more after that, one final one probably on Zoom. I hope that we'll be able to meet again after the July meeting, which will be the September meeting. We don't meet in August. So July, we've got Anatella Di Santo on the hunting for new physics at the Large Hadron Collider. She's speaking from the Atlas experiment in CERN. So that should be interesting as well. So keep tuned, and we'll see you again next time. Oh, Paul's with us now. Do you want to add anything, Paul, as co-organizer? He's not.
Thank you.
Whoa, okay, forget that. We'll see you all next time. Thanks again. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Christian.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Cheers, Paul.